What is the number one destroyer of happiness? Write in the comments what you think about it. What is the number one destroyer of happiness? Enjoy the show. Story 1: Selfishness, Negativity. How so? In life, you can focus on many things, but two general categories equal sign. Things you have, things you don't have. So what a lot of people do, and what advertisers try to get you to do, is think more about stuff they wish they had. There's a limit to what one person can actually have, but there's no limit to what you could have. So this means they're always thinking about stuff they could have but don't actually have. And how can anyone be happy when they spend so much time focused on what they don't have? So just to be balanced, the opposite of this, being unhappy thinking about what you don't have, is to think of what you do have and to appreciate that. Story 2: Suboptimal brain development, function, or degradation thereof. It will affect every single thing that makes you a conscious, living human. I think this is one of the leading causes of violence. Neglectful, abusive parents/partners, disagreements, addiction, and generally a lot of irrational behavior. It can start happening gradually and invisibly from when you're young because of malnutrition, toxin exposure, lack of sleep. Thereby, you may grow up to have major lost potential and bound to have a less happy and successful life than if you developed normally. This decreased happiness can take form in so many ways, and the way it expresses itself also depends on your DNA. Some get ADHD with decreased ability of attention, poor executive function, etc. Anxiety and depression are also important symptoms of a dysfunctional brain. You will generally experience increased struggling, and things most people take for granted will be harder, whether it's having an upbeat vibe or sufficient energy to be successful in communicating and forming relationships, or it's about acquiring skills and knowledge and have the ability to efficiently put this into practice. In general, though, having suboptimal brain functioning makes you less vibrant. That's the key word, vibrancy. This is what makes you able to be happy, having the capacity of vibrancy so that you can enjoy the little things. You feel okay or more than okay at baseline. You don't need much to be happy, and things come easy to you. Less struggling, more enjoyment. Your senses are sharper, and the way you process them makes your conscious experience flow pleasantly. So, emo brain health needs to be taken 1000% more seriously, and kids should learn all kinds of aspects about health in school. Teenagers get 2 hours too little of sleep on average, and I think if they learned from an early age the importance of it, namely at school, and what consequences other behaviors such as drinking alcohol can have on their health in great detail, they would be much better prepared to make wise decisions when the time comes where they're starting to develop independence. If we built information streams from science to the public and democratized the important scientific findings that concern all of us, we would see much less mental health problems, both the diagnosed problems and the undiagnosed, or the people who fall in between diagnoses. There would be more vibrancy and happiness, less disease and suffering, more responsible parents, and more rationality in society. Story 3: Chronic depression, mental illness. I never got a chance to know myself before it, and I'm likely never going to find out how I'd be without it. And when the most common therapies and medications don't work, and the doctors run out of things to throw at you, it's one of the worst feelings. When everyone says you should see a doctor, and no doctor can help you, what can you even do? It feels like I was born a way that would never fit into this world, and now I know I'll have to fight tooth and nail for the rest of my life to crawl my way through the bare minimum of what's expected in society. And if you don't experience it, it's impossible to fully comprehend. I don't intend to give up, but knowing this is a struggle that literally has no end is debilitating. And it's how I was born. I didn't have a chance. Story 4: Comparing your life to someone else's. Focusing on what other people have and what they are doing with their life, not focusing on your own life and counting your own blessings. Especially with social media, filters and Photoshop on pictures, etc., people only project the good and create a false image of what their life and relationships are truly like. People think all that social media stuff is real, and it isn't. It makes people feel inferior, but they are trying to compete with something that's not real. Story 5: The rat race, if a big one. I think after the obvious things are met, a decent house, some retirement savings, emergency fund, ability to travel a few weeks a year, etc., there are steep diminishing returns on what money will do for your happiness. At the very least, people don't factor in the additional stress from climbing the corporate ladder relative to what additional money will do for you. Story 6: Poverty. So many fun essential things require money, and the pursuit of money is one of the main fun killers. Imagine having enough money to do whatever you wanted. You could get physical, mental health care, you wouldn't need to go to work, you could spend your time doing things that are enjoyable and making friends and spend time with your family. On top of that, a lot of the stresses people experience are related to money, either directly or indirectly. Story 7. Lacking gratitude. As someone ambitious and relatively privileged, my early 20s I took so much for granted. It took a lot of growing up to create perspective to be grateful for what I have. It also allows me to move forward in life while still being satisfied with what I have already done. Now I can see there are so many people who never learned this. Nothing will ever make them truly fulfilled because there is always going to be more to achieve, obtain, etc., and always someone who has more or better than you. Story 8. Saturation. Happiness and sadness are both victims of our adaptability. Anything that makes you happy or sad that you are constantly exposed to will eventually make you go numb to that feeling in that context. For a long-term positive life experience, what you really want is satisfaction. And that requires challenge, growth, meaning, and commitment, usually to something bigger than just yourself. Story 9. Lack of money. And people who say it can't buy you happiness have obviously never needed it truly. While it can't make life perfect, here's what life is when you don't have enough to exist. Constant stress that affects you physically and emotionally. You literally get sick from it, and it ages you. You never sleep well, even if you have time to sleep. Every minute of every day is a battle of worry, even in the back of your mind, about how you'll make it. You can't see a doctor, so forget it. Teeth bad? Oh well. Worried about that cough? Suck it up and get another job. You can't enjoy living because you can't afford it. No vacations, time to relax. You can't afford good food. You can't pursue hobbies or any other interests. Your life from start to finish is about existing. It affects your relationships. People are a-holes, so if you're poor and they aren't, don't expect them to want friendship with you. And finding a partner? In America, your worth as a human being is based on your credit score and how much dollar you have. People actually think someone with a higher credit score is more deserving of everything from security to love. It affects your self-esteem, which limits your potential. You actually don't feel worthy of being loved or anything else. Just like there's no point to a life without love. If your whole life has been nothing but financial struggle, you'll find it hard to see any value in living. P.S. Poverty is a trajectory. It's like being shot out of a cannon and try and grab onto jungle vines to secure yourself. If you start out in the red, the chances of you ever getting in the black are very, very slim, no matter how hard you work. Story 10. Comparing yourself and/or your life to that of other people in your close proximity. Read somewhere once, can't remember where, that despite the top students at a middling college and the bottom students at Harvard and other top schools doing about the same on the SAT exams, so ostensibly roughly equal academically, the students at the top schools are way less likely to finish and get their degree as the ones at worse schools. It has to do with them comparing themselves to their peers, being happy, unhappy with their relative performance, and acting on that. Story 11. Pride. Even if you honestly would appreciate being, doing, or having something, inner pride will crush the honesty and you end up being the biggest bully to yourself, never allowing yourself to have what your soul really wants, like love, patience, peace, gentleness, faithfulness, joy, goodness, and kindness. Pride is too hard-headed to accept these things. Story 12. One way, I think, is to get too attached to anything or any phase of your life. It's fine to enjoy things while you have them, but if you try to control everything and maintain the status quo, you will be miserable and nostalgic all the time. I think it's best to ride the waves of change and embrace new things. This is obviously easier said than done. Story 13. In the US, our politicians. They put in laws to help the rich squash the middle class. They fire everyone up against ourselves, of all people. We're all Americans with real threats outside our borders who reach in to divide us on social media, but the politicians only talk about how crappy the other party is. They get very little done. Again, BC the fight like children over power instead of trying to find solutions for Americans. Story 14. Unreasonable expectations about life. There's a reason it's called an average. It's okay to not be the next US president. It's okay to not be the one that solves the entire climate change problem, or homelessness, or whatever. Help in your own little way and be okay just having a normal aka average life. Unreasonable expectations about the people in your life. There is no such thing as telepathy, so stop expecting people to read your mind. Also, they are not clones of you. And even if they were, you'd still see their faults. Let people be different from you. Story 15. Capitalism. It literally seeks to leave workers discontent, because discontent people spend money on leisure goods to try to make up for their lack of happiness. The goal of capitalism is to find the absolute minimum level of support it can give workers before it starts hurting productivity. Workers then spend their own resources trying to make up the shortfall in QOL, and owners recoup the profit. If we all didn't have to give up so much of our time and energy to jobs that exploit us as much as they possibly could, we'd be much, much happier. If we didn't live in a world designed explicitly to make us think that consumption equals happiness, we'd be much, much happier. If we were able to get the full value of our labor, we'd work much, much less for the same compensation, and we'd be much, much happier. Story 16. Being dishonest. You will regret the things you did and the things you never did. It's a fact of life, but you have to move forward and live in the present. Be true to yourself, always be honest, act honest, have standards for yourself and value your mistakes, because those mistakes are going to help you be better if and only if you vow to be honest to yourself. At least that's how I feel about things. Story 17. Seeking immediate satisfaction. It is 100% understandable to want to be happy as much as possible, but taking shortcuts or putting off responsibilities to get immediate happiness and having to deal with the consequences later is usually going to be an overall decrease to your happiness. You have work in the morning, taking hard drugs, staying up all night watching TV or playing video games / binge eating sweets. Whatever brings you immediate comfort is going to make your next day much more difficult. You are going to be miserable during the day, and you are going to want to seek immediate comfort as soon as you get home. The cycle repeats. Plan ahead. Get your groceries before you run out and have to eat peanut butter for breakfast. Have clean clothes ready to wear the next day so you don't have to do the smell test and see what you can re-wear. It sucks taking time to do chores or organizing whatever, but putting effort now into the future, either short-term next day or long-term weeks, months, or years in advance, is usually going to be an overall increase to your happiness. Once you are overall more happy, you will have more time and energy to keep making good choices and further improve whichever portions of your life you are currently working on. Planning ahead with groceries and whatnot also saves you money. Story 18. Not knowing what you want or having a naive understanding of your desire. You marry your happiness by what you own. The problem is that once the new shine wears off, that happiness fades, and you need to put a new item in that spot to facilitate happiness. Happiness needs to come from within in order to avoid this. Story 19. Money. Let me explain. In today's consumerist society, people are indoctrinated to believe that money equals happiness. And by money, I mean both money per se, but also material things. That game is rigged. It will never be enough. If you buy into that game, you will be forever unhappy because you will compare everything you have and do to someone else who has more. Of course, being poor AF when you don't have enough money to take care of needs is not conducive to a happy life. I know that too. I grew up poor AF. Story 20. Overthinking. Sometimes we tend to overthink because the usual thing that happens us. We create scenarios in our minds without certainty if they are true. So it's better if there is trust and transparency between each other, and it is where relationships are built that may lead to long-term connections. It may not be easy, but you know in the end it is always worth a shot. Story 21. High expectations. Someone who can find true joy in the simple things, like a clear blue sky, a temperate day, ice cream, time spent with loved ones, etc., without worrying about becoming rich or famous, can live a fulfilled life. Believe it or not, there's wisdom to be found in that Sheryl Crow song, Soak Up the Sun. It's not having what you want, it's wanting what you've got. Story 22. Internal personal, depression, physiological misery. External personal addiction. Internal social envy. External social. Being badly raised as a child. This I would point to as a root cause of a lot of the reasons for unhappiness. Children can be trained not to practice envy, can be fortified against addiction, can be provided with environments that at least mitigate the environmental and lifestyle causes of depression, as opposed to the genetic causes. It is very difficult to make yourself happy when you have been unhappy. It is less difficult to prevent people from becoming unhappy in the first place, and to build them into people less likely to be unhappy. Story 23. Medical issues. Until you've suffered chronic illness pain, you have no idea how it literally sucks the life out of you. At least with other things, you normally have some level of ability to dig yourself out of that hole. With illnesses, sometimes it leaves you stuck in it with not much you can do to improve your situation. Of course, there are many happy people out there with chronic, debilitating illnesses, but it's normally a daily struggle of trying to be happy. Story 24, like in a relationship. Unclear goals or different expectations. For general, usually it's something small. You get cut off in traffic, or someone doesn't hold the door open, or someone flips you off. And that's all you're going to be thinking about today. You won't believe what happened on my way to work today. Story 25. Seeking instant personal gratification over long-term goals, health, and relationships with friends and family. It's all baked into that one concept. Live for yourself in the now, and you'll be susceptible to all forms of addiction and health issues and won't be able to accomplish any goals that require a long-term view. Put your head down, work hard, and think more about others than yourself, and you'll have a great life long-term. And honestly, you'll probably get more of a dopamine flow, making others happy than trying to make yourself happy. Story 26. Major home remodels with young kids in the family. I've seen more divorce homes as a home inspector from that cause than any other. If you have young kids, choose family over all else until they're 10 or so, unless you have a major support circle like lots of family in town. If you can't choose family for the first 10 years, boy, you can't do it all. Story 27. Believing your happiness is dependent on others. You have an obligation to maintain a baseline of happiness for yourself. Anyone that's in your life, family, friends, lovers, acquaintances, even co-workers, are supposed to add on to that baseline or, at the very least, not erode it. If they start to, that's your sign they need to be removed from your life. Every person you invite in should only have intentions to add to the baseline, not take from it. When I learned that, it became so simple because we literally cannot control other people except for ourselves. I can tell you, I expect you to respect me. But if you choose not to, then I have the control to walk away from you. Period. It ends there. It's that simple. If I care about my own preservation, then I'd make the decisions that most benefit me, even if that decision means letting go of what I hoped would happen with that person. I live in reality, not off hopes and dreams. Story 28. Constantly worrying about the future. Not to say one should not prepare for the future, because of course we need to spend each day as if we will be here for the long haul and make ourselves the best version of ourselves. But constantly worrying about what-ifs doesn't help. You need to live in the now, find happiness in the now. We all think once I do /get/achieve this thing, I'll be happy. You live like that, the goalposts keep moving and you'll never be happy. Story 29. Childhood trauma. Just look at the ACEs study. The worse you get fucked up in childhood, the harder your life is. And kids have zero control over their circumstances. It's really hard to get over, and you'll struggle with it every day. I saw someone answer the death of a loved one in this thread, and all these people were talking about their dead parents. My mom died almost a decade ago, and the only tears I've ever shed over it were when I had to explain it to my daughter, who was in kindergarten at the time. I've cried more over some celebrities dying than I've cried over family members because I got more joy out of the celebrities. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, like it. Be sure to write comments and share your stories.